We're parents, teachers, and educators, and like you, we're passionate about restoring our culture for Christ. This is Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education.
Hello again, this is Marlon Detweiler. We are recording another podcast on Veritas Vox today, and we have the very influential Michael Farris with us. At Veritas, we believe that education of children is the privilege and the responsibility of parents. The Homeschool Legal Defense Association has made a career or made an organization out of believing things like that, and it has been fighting for those freedoms for 35 years. Michael Farris with us, the founder of HSLDA, is going to talk to us a little bit about some of the battles that they've had and some of the things that they've seen happen over that time period. Michael, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Martin, it's great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Well, I got to start because we got to make you human. Right now, you're a big figure. And the thing I know about big figures in the marketplace is they have real lives too. I was astounded, maybe jealous is a better word, to find out that you had at one point, somebody wrote 29 grandchildren from 10 children. What's the current status? Give us a little background on
your numbers are up to date. So my wife and I have 10 kids, which was not exactly where I started off philosophically. When my wife and I were dating, I won a college speech contest advocating zero population growth. And, I got $35 for winning that contest. It was the same week as the original Earth Day, and we celebrated Earth Day for years by buying $35 worth of disposable diapers. So, but we're past the diaper stage for ourselves, at least. But our grandkids are range from newly married and have just graduated from Patrick Henry College. She's 23, I guess, and we have two that are under a year old. And so a lot of kids, a lot of grandkids. And I tell liberals, you take over America your way, we'll take over America our way.
And I think it'll work. It's really funny. I only have 4 kids, 4 boys. They're all married, and we have 6 grandchildren. One is not yet born.
Okay.
But I tell people when it comes to age, I say, I'd like to tell you the age of my kids, but it keeps changing. It's pretty good to remember.
I will give you credit the first 2 times. After that, it's mine.
That's great. Well, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, which is easier to say HSLDA, that really comes off the tongue very well, by the way. I don't know if that was part of your thinking or not. Tell us about the formation of it. What caused it to happen?
Well, I was a lawyer in Washington State and had been doing statewide, regional-wide, Christian-oriented litigation. I had started the Moral Majority of Washington State, and then we changed that to the Bill of Rights Legal Foundation. And in the midst of that, my wife and I started homeschooling, and that got circled around a bit, and it was in the newspapers some. And I started getting calls from homeschooling families wanting legal help. And I figured this is a really good way to go broke, because when people want a Christian lawyer, what they really want is a free lawyer.
I just want to say something. I love what I call a Christian negotiation. And this goes with legal costs as well. And it goes like this. I will not insult you by paying what you're asking. I insist on paying more.
Well, that's great. I will come deal with you all the time. So,
it does cause people to enjoy working with me when it happens. It doesn't always happen because some people price themselves too high, and I'm not willing to do that then.
Good. But nonetheless, basically, I figured that if homeschoolers form what amounts to a union where we all join together, we pay a little bit, and if they come attack one of us, we all come to the fight. And so that was the start in 1983, where actually In 2 months, we'll have our 40th anniversary of HSBA. And so it's been going on. There's over 100,000 families that are members today of the organization, and staff there is just about 100 staffers that work at HSLDA. And so it's been a wonderful ride. I haven't worked there for about 7 years now, but I've been the chairman of the board the entire 40 years.
So you remain the chairman today?
I do. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Tell me, in the early years, what were the primary hills to climb? What were the primary battles?
Well, homeschooling was just perceived to be illegal. Now, from our perspective, under the Constitution of the United States, it was legal everywhere. But government had a different idea. And generally speaking, it would be fair to say that it was perceived as illegal essentially everywhere in the country in 1983. And state by state, battle by battle, we worked on the either legislative changes or judicial victories or other kinds of victories. But ultimately, it was convincing people at large, including the general public, that homeschooling was an okay option. We didn't have to prove to the people that it was the best. We, of course, think it's the best, at least best for our families, that's for sure. But all we had to do was to let people, judges, legislators, general public, believe that it was okay, that it was good for kids. And what happened was the vast majority of people who know homeschoolers think they're good, think that their kids have turned out well. In fact, it's one of the reasons homeschooling has grown so much. People look at the homeschool kids and say, boy, those are good kids. I'd like my kids to turn out like that. Yeah. And then they look at the parents and say, those are just average parents. If they can do it successfully, maybe I can as well. And so, we won with a combination of good practical demonstration of success and solid constitutional litigation and legislative work. So it was a combination, but there's no doubt that the overriding factor is God intervened for us time and again. And if we don't give credit to God, every chance we get the opportunity, God will remember. And secondly, more importantly, it's the truth. It is absolutely the truth of what happened.
It really is wonderful to see how God's providence worked through all this. You didn't mention you mentioned that the government really was your antithetical or where the battle was fought. What role did the public schools play in being your nemesis or fighting you in court? Of
course, the public schools are the government.
Okay. And I don't object at all. In fact, I use the term government schools. They are funded by the government with our money, of course. They are directed by the government, and they are in some significant ways subservient to the government. But they're not synonymous with the government. Are you suggesting that they are?
They are. They are completely. They're as much the government as the sheriff's office is the government.
Unpack that a little bit. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way.
Well, the corporations that I live in infamous Loudoun County, Virginia, where our public schools are off the rails. But the Loudoun County School District is a government entity. The way to tell is they're bound by the Constitution of the United States. Only government entities are bound by the Constitution of the United States. And so they are government juridical persons, to be very precise about it. The Loudoun County School District is a government agency, just like the Loudoun County Sheriff Department or the Loudoun County Health Department. They're all government agencies, and they are government through and through. And so, at the legislative and legal level for the battle for homeschooling, it was oftentimes the local school district, but not always. It was oftentimes the superintendent that was the problem. Oftentimes the State School Boards Association. But the reality was, when we were in the legislature, we were fighting the entire education establishment, including the teachers union. You know, they are not a government entity, but they are affiliated with the government.
No doubt. Yeah.
And so the teachers union opposed us, still opposes homeschooling. And so we were fighting this giant establishment, which is, I mean, the teachers union standing by themselves are considered to be the most powerful lobbying force in every state legislature in the country. That's just the plain reality of the fact.
Yeah.
And homeschoolers, time after time, beat them. You know, it didn't beat them all at once, didn't beat them in 6 months. It took 25 years approximately, but we beat them because A, we had the truth on our side, and B, God's stronger than they are.
Yeah. Were there specific significant hills to climb or battles to win that became pivotal moments in the success of accomplishing the goal that HSLDA set out with, of having all 50 states have homeschooling be legal?
There were several important milestones in that regard. There were 3 states in the early, kind of the main early phase of homeschooling that insisted that homeschool parents needed to be certified teachers. Those were North Dakota, Michigan, and Iowa were the last 3 states that took that position. And one by one, we picked those off. I argued a case in the Supreme Court of Michigan that ruled the teacher certification law to be unconstitutional. In North Dakota, I argued so many cases in the Supreme Court of North Dakota, and I was not going against opposing counsel. I was going against the Supreme Court itself. I was there so often, rather than saying, Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court, I would say, Steve, Fred, Larry, how's the fishing? It's good to see you again. And so the reality was that the judges were just dug in, and so we did an effort to bring homeschool leaders from the whole country in to North Dakota to frankly embarrass them. We called it the Bismarck Tea Party. Now, this was before the modern Tea Party movement, and I went to a local Kmart, bought every Lipton tea bag they had there, and we had homeschoolers clip little signals on them that said, consent of the governed for homeschoolers too. And we passed those out to everyone in the state capitol. I mean, the secretaries, not just the legislators, but all the administrative offices. Everybody got their lifetime supply of tea that day. And we frankly embarrassed them to the point that they relented and made homeschooling legal in the state of North Dakota.
Oh,
and
great story.
in Iowa, we won a procedural victory in the state of Iowa that made it essentially impossible for them to criminally prosecute families. And so the legislature tried to change it to a child abuse prosecution where parents have fewer rights. And so on the day the vote was taken, and it looked like for all purposes that they had enough votes to pass this horrible bill, one senator came out on the floor or out in the lobby area and said he couldn't sleep at night. His conscience was bothering about him about this. And so he asked if there was a homeschool family in his district he could talk to. And they got somebody on the phone with him, and he went back on the floor and made a speech that he was going to stand for homeschool freedom. And that tied the vote, but it made it clear that we were going to lose anyway, because a tie vote, the Democrat lieutenant governor could break the tie and we were going to lose. But then they took the vote, and in this particular procedure, it had to be an absolute majority. One of our best friends was missing, and they took the vote and they fell one vote short because this very friendly state senator lost track of his time and was downtown listening to a speech by Newt Gingrich. And they took the vote and they failed because they didn't have an absolute majority. There was no tie lieutenant governor could break. And God blinded our friend's eyes to his watch, and he missed the vote. And that's how we won. It's just, an amazing story. So that's, it was a story of things like that over time that God clearly delivered the victory in homeschool.
Over 3 decades, I'll bet there are a lot of stories that you can really see God's hand at work in what was going on. That's incredible. What made you so comfortable with this? I heard you say, your legal practice started as one that was seeking to be an advocate. Yeah. Was it just things kind of just lined up one at a time, or was there some real serious moment in time where you said, this is what I need to do, and focused your attention on that one thing?
Well, I know that I'm very unusual in this regard, but I wanted to be a lawyer from the 4th grade on. I started reading the newspaper every day when I was 6, and I was very interested in politics. And one day my dad and I were changing irrigation pipe, and he told me that if I wanted to get involved in politics, I needed to be a lawyer. And he pointed across the field to a lawyer's house we could see across the way. And he said, lawyers make $20,000 a year. And which was, at that time, a new Cadillac was $2,000 a year. So lawyers make 10 Cadillacs a year. I go, wow. And my dad was a public school principal. And what he wanted me to do was to be a lawyer for school districts to fight the ACLU, because he didn't like what the ACLU was doing.
Interesting.
To public schools. And so I set off in that path. I wrote my undergraduate honors thesis on constitutional issues in school law. And in law school, I was kind of the resident con law guru. Some of my fellow classmates hired me to tutor them in con law, and the constitutional law professor hired me as his research assistant. So I wanted to be in constitutional law and education. I also wanted to serve Christ in that regard. And so by the time we got through law school, I realized that the vast majority of public schools and the ACLU were on the same side. And so it was pretty easy for me to transition my interest into this area. And frankly, it was just my family started homeschooling and the light went on. And so, God opened the door, and we said, this is what we need to do.
How did you end up now? Michael Smith was your early partner. How did you all connect?
There was a man that frankly introduced a lot of people, including both Mike Smith's family and my family, to homeschooling. His name was Raymond Moore, and he wrote some books on homeschool related issues. And my wife heard him on Focus on the Family with Dr. Dobson and wanted to homeschool. Mike Smith heard him, and his wife heard that same program, and they got interested in homeschooling. And I met Dr. Moore in person when he was recording a program for Tim and Bev LaHaye. I worked for the LaHayes at the time, and with Concerned Women for America. And he talked me into wanting to homeschool, and I went home to talk to my wife, and she'd been praying about it for about 3 months, trying to work up the courage to talk to me about it. And so we started off, and I was talking to Dr. Moore, and he knew about Mike Smith, knew about me, introduced us together. And so I approached Mike about, I had the idea of starting HSLDA, and I called him and said, would you like to start this with me? And he agreed. And so we've been together all the time. Mike's still on the board of HSLDA as well. He just retired as president this past summer, and we've worked together for effectively 40 years.
That's great. Well, in spite of the fact that I had never met you before this morning, I've had a chance to be in Mike Smith's office a few times, and it was always fun to meet with him because he always wanted to talk about golf. I've had a lifetime of playing competitive golf, and he always wanted to hear stories, and we had that in common.
Well, that's great. Yeah. Well, I've gotten to like golf more in the last year or two, but it's Mike loves golf.
That's great. Where do you see you continue to serve as the chairman, so you're providing oversight and direction while not working daily, although chairman work can be daily work too. I shouldn't say that. But where do you see the battles in the near future? The last couple of years have had some things come to fruition that have been brewing for 100 years. But they've had some things come to fruition that are very challenging. You live in Loudoun County, which is one of the epicenters of what I'm talking about.
Right.
Where's the battle going?
Well, there's two related streams of the battle, perhaps, and what's going on in the public schools in Loudoun County is, like you say, the epicenter of a phenomenon that encompasses almost all public schools in the country. I would say, if you think your school is an exception, you're probably wrong. And so
we are legally the exception, even if practically they're not.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so it's a woke ideology that preaches that there are two classes of people. It's the same dialectic as Marxism. Marx was rich versus poor, and they just have a different way of saying essentially the same thing. It's oppressed classes versus dominant classes in the way they see things. So all white people, especially all white Christian people, especially all white Christian males, are the oppressors. And if you are a person of color, if you are a sexual minority, then you are an oppressed class. And it's time for the oppressed victims to rise up and take it to the oppressors. And I mean, our county and our neighboring county, Fairfax County, just carried this so crazy to withhold the national merit testing results from the students who got national merit status, and they could use this for college application because they're so committed to equity, meaning that they want to cut off any achievement, and they don't want people to feel bad, and they don't want white people or others or Asians to reign over other people who didn't do well. And so it's just all this class-based nonsense. They think of everyone in classes, whereas the traditional way of thinking in this country is about individuals. And so there are individuals from every race, color, creed, background that do well. There are people from every race, color, creed, background that do poorly. And so we need to look at people as individuals and not as just members of classes. And at the heart of it, it's socialistic. And at the heart of socialism is coercive violence. Now, the homeschooling part of that is they want to force every kid in the country to learn in this fashion. Now, they picked a bad time to trot out their biggest weapons. Elizabeth Bartlett at Harvard Law School got a lot of notoriety about 2 years ago in the very early days of the COVID pandemic for arguing that effectively homeschooling should be banned. There are other law professors, Catherine Ross at George Washington, Martha Albert Finneman at Emory, Kimberly Urraco at Northwestern, all essentially say the same thing. And so there's a movement afoot to try to ban homeschooling so that all kids in the country, ban private schooling for that matter, that's what the lady from Emory wants to do, is they want all children to learn this woke ideology. Now, they picked the time to do that when effectively every kid in America was homeschooled for a little while. And so the appreciation—
That has a sense of humor.
It was hilarious. It was the only silver lining in the whole COVID thing. And there are a good number of people that converted permanently to be homeschoolers. But just think of the peace of mind that homeschooling gave to every parent in the country, because if homeschooling was so well known, people know homeschooling works, kids do well. I'm not going to freak out that my kid's going to be homeschooled for a little while. And so we gave peace of mind to the entire population of the country that it'll probably be okay in the long run. And so so the political clout of homeschooling jumped a huge degree in that period of time. And so I say, let the heathen nations rage in vain. Just try it. But we have to be on our guard, because there's going to be a day where they don't remember these facts, and they're going to come after us. And we have to be fighting for liberty every day, all day long, and never give up.
The battle never ends.
That's right.
That, until death do us part, the battle goes on.
Yeah.
You in 2017 gave up your staff role as the president of HSLDA and joined the Alliance for Defending Freedom. What was part of your thinking in doing that?
Well, I had been doing two jobs since 2000. I was leading Patrick Henry College. I was first the president, and then I was the chancellor, and then at HSLDA I was the president, and then I was the chairman. But I kept the chairman title, but I was actively employed at HSLDA, doing all the appellate work and leading the federal lobbying efforts. And we came to a point, and by the way, Mike Smith was the president during that period of time, but we were working together effectively as partners. And I got asked by an executive recruiting firm to apply to be the president of Alliance Defending Freedom. And I I knew about them, in great detail, frankly, but not as much as I ultimately learned once I joined them as their CEO. But I had the highest respect for ADF, and I looked at it, and every aspect of what ADF did, I had either expertise, like in religious freedom and parental rights, or I had at least some experience, right to life, and free speech issues, and the other issues that ADF works on, including training law students. They train law students. And my role at Patrick Henry College, training students who are going to law school, had a great overlap there. And so it just I realized that, including I had a degree in public international law from the University of London, and they have a big international program. We have a big international program, I should say now. And I just thought, this is just too big of a coincidence. And so I applied, seeing how God had taken all the various threads of my life and said, you're going to use them all in this season at ADF. And so I applied for the job. I guess there were about 300 people applied, and they hired me. And so they had to determine whether it was God's will for me to be hired. I could only decide it was God's will for me to apply. And
Understood. Well, it sounds like there was a full circle in your career, from starting as a generalist helping Christians in Christian matters that fell within legal circumstances, to specializing with an area of homeschooling, and then going back to helping in a broad way, going back generally. What a wonderful path to see that God took you. Where are the goals taking ADF? What is it? How have they found themselves challenged and providing opportunities in the last few years, in light of the kinds of things that have been raising their head more today than they had in the past?
Well, ADF, which is the largest conservative or Christian legal organization in the world, a staff of about 400. We have annual budget of just north of $100 million. And so we're multiple times bigger than any other group in this field. But we do some of the hardest sections of cases. The clash, the biggest battle right now is in both the free speech and religious freedom areas, is the clash of the LGBT movement against Christianity. There's, there are public school applications of that. We argued the Masterpiece Case Shop case in the Supreme Court. My successor, Kristen Wagner, when she was general counsel, argued that case. She just argued the 303 Creative case in the Supreme Court. This, I think, is going to settle the issue in the free speech zone of that clash. I think we're going to win. We wrote the law in the Dobbs case from Mississippi, and we were co-counsel to the state of Mississippi at the Supreme Court in that case. We didn't put our names on the brief for strategic reasons, but we we're there helping them. We help them with the drafting of all the legal papers and all of that. And we embedded one of our lawyers full-time on their staff for several months. And so we work in right to life, freedom of speech, free exercise of religion, parental rights, and moral and family issues. So all the transgender sports cases in the country, ADF is doing those cases.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
So all of those huge challenges, but we're being attacked regularly. We're called a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, and so we have high-tech companies canceling our contracts, and insurance companies have canceled our contracts, and it's they're trying to deplatform us because they don't want people who will stand up for God's truth in these areas, and we will consistently stand up for God's truth, and God's continued to protect us in these ways. But to say that we have challenges are the understatement of the century.
Well, you provide a wonderful example of a career in the public sphere that recognizes that this is God's world entirely, and that we don't live separately as Christians, that our faith has wonderful opportunity for impacting culture. And in our world of classical Christian education, that's an ongoing conversation that we're always supportive of. And I love the example that you've provided. I'm hopeful that a time like this podcast will motivate parents and students to think about how they might do the same thing in their sphere. And we see more and more advocates for God's truth in all of culture.
Well, amen to that. I mean, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says, "In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths." And there's no asterisk and footnote at the bottom of the page that says, well, except in this area, except in this area, except in this area. No, all of it is where we're supposed to acknowledge God. So whatever we do, wherever we are, God's in charge, and we're to be his agents, his emissary, his spokesman. And we got to stand strong.
Well, 10 children, 29 grandchildren, founding HSLDA, helping advance ADF and founding Patrick Henry. What next?
Well, I have just retired as the CEO of ADF in October 1st. And I have 3 part-time gigs right now. I'm still working with ADF on parental rights issues in particular, and also some of the international issues, particularly in India and Latin America. And then I'm helping the Convention of States project that I helped found 10 years ago. And I'll principally be working with testifying in state legislatures on that to try to rein in the abuses of power by the federal government by using Article 5 of the Constitution, which was one of my other brainchilds that I helped. I mean, it was my idea to start that organization. Mark Meckler was my co-founder, kind of like Mike Smith was my co-founder of HSLDA. And then I'm going to be the general counsel for the National Religious Broadcasters on a part-time basis, because their free speech rights are under attack as well because they're Christians. And so it's an opportunity to serve there. I've been on their executive board the last 3 or 4 years. And when I realized I was going to transition away from being CEO, this opportunity arose, and I thought, okay, this is a good fit, and I can. So I have 3 part-time jobs, but I've told them it's all a third of 40 hours, not a third of 70 hours, because I want to play golf 3 or 4 times a week.
Good for you. You need to come play golf with me.
I would love to do that. I'm finally getting a little bit better. The other day I shot my age, but it was on a par 64 course.
Okay, well, shooting your age is an accomplishment that is hopefully in my future, and congratulations for having done it. So I was 7 over par and shot my age. So. Well, I have one very important remaining question. This is not the question, but you went to Gonzaga Law School, correct?
That's right.
So, are you a Gonzaga basketball fan?
I am. In fact, I've created a law school ranking I call the hoopla ranking, where you take the basketball ranking and the law school ranking, you average them together. And on that ranking, Gonzaga is clearly in the top 10 in the nation. But otherwise, not so much.
Well, it has been, I enjoy college basketball, and it has been fun to see a little school in the Pacific Northwest give ACC teams, I'm an ACC school graduate, NC State, and give ACC teams a fit and really play at a national level.
Yeah.
Michael, what you have done for so many of us is something that I want to say for anyone that's willing to join me in this, thank you. This has been, my career changed to serve the Christian school and homeschool community 30 years ago or so, and you have been paving the way for us for a long time, and we are grateful. So thank you.
Well, it's been my honor and privilege. It's what I wanted to do since the fourth grade. And said, what a treat to be able to do all these fun things. They're battles, to be sure, but when you're doing what God called you to do, it's ultimately fun. It's very joyful. Well, you're welcome, but it's a delight.
Well, thank you. Today, folks, we have had Michael Farris with us on Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education. Thank you for joining us.